Gentlemen, may I ask a favor? Would you introduce yourself, please?
I'm Robbie.
Thank you.
John.
Thank you, John.
My name is Jim Morrison.
Jim, thank you.
Ray Manzarek.
Ray, let me start with you in a question, if I may. How do you characterize your music? Does it have a name?
Well, it's impossible, really, to put a label on it because of where we are in the music. Being on the inside, you're only of the music, and all categories have to come from the outside. So someone else is going to have to say what our music is rather than us, because we are our music.
Too much in it at the moment. No.
An album but find there's at least one song on it that's not up to the standard of the rest, this podcast is for you. Welcome to Trimming the Musical Fat. I'm Paul Nicholson.
And I'm Stephen Nicholson.
And thank you for joining us for the latest Trimming the Classic episode. And the subject of today's episode is a sophomore effort by legendary American rock band The Doors, 1967's Strange Days album. Stephen and I will pick a song from the album we like the least, our favourites, and discuss the album as a whole. Okay, let's talk The Doors. And we'll start with Stephen asking me 3 questions about the album.
Okay, hello everybody. We won't be talking about windows. We will be talking about doors today. And Paul, the first question is this. So this song was performed many times live early in the Doors' career when they were the house band at the Whiskey A Go-Go in LA. But it was not released on an album until Strange Days a year later. What was that song?
Was it Moonlight Drive?
It is not.
Ooh.
I'll give you 2 more guesses. Very famous one.
Say People Are Strange.
Not that famous one. Give you a clue. It's long.
When the music's over.
Yep, when the music's over is correct.
Turn out the light.
Yeah. Question 2. This song features one of the earliest uses of the Moog synthesizer.
Is it the title track?
You are correct. Well done. Yep, it's Strange Days. Great tune as well.
Yes.
And the third and final question, some of the sound effects used in this song were created by dropping a Coke bottle in a garage can and beating coconut shells on a tile floor.
Horse Latitudes?
Yeah. The crazy one, yep. So it is Horse Latitudes. Well done. So that's, well, in fact, 2 out of 3 right there.
As Meatloaf would sing. As Meatloaf would say.
2 out of 3 ain't. I'm not going to sing it though.
So Strange Days is the second album by American rock band The Doors. The Doors were vocalist Jim Morrison, keyboardist Ray Manzarek, guitarist Robbie Krieger, and drummer John Densmore. The album was released in September 1967 and produced by Paul A. Rothchild. Upon its release, Strange Days reached number 3 on the US Billboard 200 and eventually earned platinum certification. It contains 2 top 30 singles, People Are Strange and Love Me 2 Times. The album cover of Strange Days, photographed by Joel Brodsky, depicts a group of street performers in New York. Although the album was quite successful, reaching number 3 in the US, its impact was attenuated by the enduring success of the band's debut album, which remained in the top 10 over 10 months after its release. According to music journalist Stephen Davis, Strange Days also proved to be the Doors' worst-selling album in their career with Jim Morrison.
Interesting.
Yeah. Apart from noting its lower commercial performance compared to the band's debut, contemporary reviews for Strange Days were generally positive. In 2012, the record was listed at number 409 on Rolling Stones magazine's list of the 500 greatest albums of all time.
A lot of people seem to think you're from San Francisco. Is that true?
No, actually, we got together in L.A., but we play in San Francisco a lot.
That's the explanation of why you have that association. Why is so much happening in San Francisco? You figured it out yet?
The West is the best.
All right, fair enough. You sold many, many albums before you sold a single record. It's a phenomenal record success all around, the album and the single. How long did it take to make that first album?
About a month.
That's a relatively short time in this day and age, isn't it?
Yeah. We're in the middle of our second album now and trying to top the first one.
You told me, though, that it took you about a year to accumulate everything and put it all together. We leap up here. Future plans. Somebody mentioned you're going somewhere.
Yeah, we're going to go to England, and our new album should be out in about September.
Have you selected a name for the album yet, Jim?
I think it's going to Strange Days.
Strange Days, then. So when did you first hear the album, Stephen?
Yeah, well, first of all, it is really bizarre. It is their weakest studio album with Jim Morrison. And the thing is, as you said there, I think because their debut in America was such a big success.
Yeah.
And continued to be. I think that just had that knock-on effect that Strange Days didn't get its moment in the sun, which is a shame because, yeah, I know we'll talk about it, but I think it's their best album. But
yeah, it's arguably better than the original.
Yeah. I think it is. But I first heard this in lockdown, COVID lockdown in 2020. And for those that are regular listeners to the show, they'll know some of the bands that, because I had the time, I was at home, a lot of bands that I now had time to really do a deep dive into their back catalogue. So like Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, and so on. And The Doors was one of them. So I think the three albums of theirs I gave a good listen to were the debuts, Strange Days and LA Woman. So I listened to it digitally, and I thought it was that good. I ended up buying the vinyl reissue of it. What about you?
I think I first heard it in maybe 1999. So I'd got all in FOP, the record shop, they had the Doors albums remastered at the time, and they were like $5. So pretty much got them all, and but this one was one of my favourites, definitely. Just the sound, and like you say, it's a shame it kind of gets overshadowed by its predecessor. And I suppose in those days, people were releasing 2 albums a year, whereas ideally, probably, it might have been better holding this back a bit till the other album had maybe had time to kind of fade a wee bit for the next album to come along. But yeah, brilliant album.
What was it? So you obviously bought it on CD. Was it the mono or the stereo version?
The stereo.
Yeah.
The stereo version. But now I've got both versions, the 50th anniversary edition.
Right.
But
I know the vinyl one I've got is the mono on Apple. Obviously, I subscribe to Apple Music for music streaming, and I think it's got the expanded edition. You actually get both the stereo and the mono back to back.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And I think because the album's that short, you actually don't mind listening to the album back to back.
No.
And I think it's that it's that short and it's that good. Just quite interesting.
Yeah, and that's the thing with the Doors albums, you can't do a trimming the musical fat, because they were the masters at getting, short, sharp, and sweet, but like brilliant as well. There was no indulgence, or some might argue, but yeah.
Oh no, I think most of their songs, were quite, short and to the point, and then they would go completely the other way and do things like the end final, and when the music's over, yeah.
I always found with the Doors, like, I loved that about the albums. They weren't like long albums, but what I would say is, see, watching them live, I just can't get into it. It's just, for me, it's almost like the songs that are long. It's like the concerts they do, all the songs are extended, and it's just, I find it boring, to be honest. The live stuff.
I think I watched, was it on YouTube? I can't remember how I ended up watching it, but I think it was their performance. It was Isle of Wight they did in 1970, was it?
I think it was 70, yeah.
And I think that was one of their last live performances, wasn't it?
It might have been, because, I suppose the next year, that was when Jim Morrison died,
I'm sure it was one of them, but I wasn't not that impressed. Jim Morrison was, he wasn't really moving or doing anything in that concert. But yeah, I wasn't blown away, put it that way.
No. And what would you say is your favourite song on the album Strange Days? What do you think's your favourite track from it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, as an album, I absolutely love it, and that's what's nice about when you do a deep dive in some classic bands and you listen to an album and you go, yes, that is fantastic. I genuinely think this is one of the greatest albums of all time. I think LA Woman is not that far behind it. Another one I bought in vinyl in 2021. Both great. But
See,
my
I think
favorite song, yeah.
I was just going to say, I think, yeah, that's okay. It's funny because I know, like, the debut album and the last album, LA Woman, they're seen as kind of the best albums, but LA Woman's probably my least favourite of them, funnily enough.
How dare you, sir? How dare you?
Yeah, that's probably the least favourite of them. It's not to say there's not great stuff on it, there is, but for me, yeah, I think it's the weakest album.
What is it you don't like, though? It's just the general, because it is a more bluesy, rootsy kind of road trip, Route 66 type album in its sound, isn't it?
Yeah, it just feels a bit lazy. I don't know.
All right.
But it's just, I suppose it's a different era as well.
Yeah.
And, but it's not to say there's not brilliant songs on it, but it's just, for me, I don't know if it's because it's always been hyped up and it's one that I've never really cared for as much as the others. But
right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So but my favorite song, it was tough. I think it could have been the title track. Could have been When the Music's Over. What's the second song again?
Your Lost Little Girl.
Is that what it's called? Your Lost Little Girl?
Yeah.
Your Lost Little Girl's great. There's loads of stuff on it that's great, but I'd probably go with maybe an obvious one when it comes down to it, because it is just a classic, and that is
Track
People
7.
Are Strange.
People are strange when you're a stranger. Faces look ugly when you're alone. Women seem wicked when you're unwanted. Streets are uneven when you're down. When you're strange, faces come out of the rain. When you're strange, no one remembers your name. When you're strange, when you're strange, when you're strange, people are strange.
People Are Strange, and actually the first version of this I heard was, I think, in the 80s by Echo and the Bunnymen, who did a cover of it for the Lost Boys soundtrack. So I heard it on the radio here. I don't think it was a big hit here, the Echo and the Bunnymen version. So that obviously led me to the Doors one, which I must have heard around the time the Oliver Stone Doors movie came out.
The film.
But yeah, I mean, People Are Strange is an amazing song. I love Ray Manzarek's piano on it. It's like that kind of bar room kind of stomp from a Western.
Yeah, that honk.
The honky tonk type stuff.
Like
it's a real,
like saloon type.
Yeah, a real bar room stomp.
Yeah.
And if you actually do listen to Jim Morrison's lyrics on it, they are creative and memorable. But I think my favourite bit in the song is the piano solo, which is about 90 seconds into the song.
All right, yeah.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. So yeah, People Are Strange. What's your favourite?
It's a tough one. I mean, People Are Strange is brilliant, but I'm going to go with the title track, actually.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Strange days have found us. Strange days have tracked us down. They're going to destroy
Yeah, I just think it's one of the best opening tracks on an album. It's just brilliant, and the sound, which I suppose for that time, I guess that would just be after Sergeant Pepper, but like it's just amazing the sound they get, sort of swirling, and the sounds like moving round, and it's bouncing off the walls, and it's just really clever. And even the vocals, there's like an effect on it. It sounds like, he's singing from a megaphone or something, and it's just really quite clever and quite heavy as well, quite psychedelic. But so yeah, for me, Strange Days, the title track for me is the best song on the album.
Yeah, brilliant song. Yep, totally agree.
And I've got a feeling we're going to have the same song for this. The least favourite song. So what would you say is your least favourite? I know it's really hard to, you've said it's one of the best albums ever, so to pick your least favourite is probably quite hard.
I listened to the album again a few times just in advance of doing this, and for me, there isn't a bad song on this album, but if I had to pick one, it would be Horse Latitudes.
Awkward instant, and the first animal is jettisoned. Legs furiously pumping their stiff green gallop, and heads bob up, poised, delicate, pause, consent, in mute nostril agony, carefully reclined.
Same for you, yeah?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And the reason I picked it, it's not really a proper song as such. It's more of a short oral poetry nightmare type thing, isn't it? But it's still an interesting track, though, and I'm glad it's on the album. Much like you said with the title track, Scott, it's very creative in its makeup and what's going on musically, and in the background, this is very much the same. The creative sound effects. I think Jim Morrison's kind of none more Jim Morrison delivery of the vocal. That's their delivery. That it does leave a lasting impression. So yeah, I'd go for Horse Latitudes.
Yeah, no, I'd be the same. I do like I quite like you were talking about the Coke can and coconuts. Was it coconuts?
Yeah.
Like I quite like that actually, in the sort of the piano banging, and it's like so I quite, as much as it's probably the least favourite, I do think, like you said, it was quite ahead of its time doing that, quite avant-garde. But I think it was, because it was quite short, it was good. But I think the problem was when the Doors played songs live and Jim Morrison would maybe get into his poetry, and it's not to say it's not good, that he is obviously an amazing poet, but just sometimes when you just want to hear the music and he'll just talk for ages, and I just find that a bit boring.
Get on with it.
Yeah.
It's, the thing with bands will often do songs like this where it's like, oh, let's just put this little instrumental type curio on there, and sometimes they work in their interest. Some you're like, oh, why did you put that on there? What a waste of time. Horse Latitudes is not one of them.
Yeah.
Still like it.
Yeah.
And it's short as well. I think it's only about 90 seconds or under 2 minutes.
1 minute 37, yeah. Okay, so the music's over. I need to turn off the lights. but before we go, a reminder that there are 80 other TTMF pods you can listen to, and over a dozen movie-related shows on our other podcast, Trimming the Movie Fat. Like what you've heard, want to show your appreciation? Why not buy Stephen and I a coffee via buymeacoffee.com. So thank you for listening, and until next time, keep trimming.
Trimming the Musical Fat podcast is a Stephen and Paul Nicholson production. Contact us via voicemail by going to anchor.fm/TTMF/message or tweet us at Musical Trimming, or email us at trimmingthemusicfat@gmail.com. Keep up to date on the show by joining our Facebook group or visiting our website www.trimmingthemusicalfat.com.
I love it. I love it.
The movie will begin in 5 moments, the mindless voice announced. All those unseated will await the next show. We filed slowly, languidly into the hall. The auditorium was vast and silent. As we seated and were darkened, the voice continued. The program for this evening is not new. You have seen this entertainment through and through. You've seen your birth, your life and death. You might recall all of the rest. Did you have a good world when you died? Enough to base a movie on?